Thank you. And so my colleague Scott and I are very different. He runs, he jumps, he climbs mountains. And I imagine that while he is doing that, he is attaching strings to all these things that he sees visually. So I'm always surprised to see the wonderful things that Scott Anderson comes up with. Thank you, Scott, and turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Sarah. That was beautiful. Enjoyed every minute of it. And welcome everybody. It's we have a truly global event today. I know I have family and friends in Scotland and England. I see folks zooming in from France. I'm saying good morning to my friends in Oregon who are out there, and good afternoon everybody from the East Coast. So it's truly a privilege to be here today. So can I have the first slide, please, Kendra? So this quote from Paul Klee is sets really the context. I'm an art educator, so I'd like to set a little bit of context for everybody, because I'm sure there's just as many people zooming in today that aren't practicing artists as there are practicing artists. But this quote is interesting to me. Drawing is simply a line going for a walk. Let's think about that for a moment. You can take things away from this, depending on your perspective. But there are two things that I take away from this quote: that drawing is inherently playful, and that Klee makes a literal association to drawing with the physical act of walking. And that's what I'd like you to kind of just bear in mind as we move through these series of slides. So next slide, please. So this is a really important, significant work in the history of what we call the genre of land art and conceptual art. Richard Long was one of the first artists really to abandon the conventional artist studio in favor of expressing his visual intentions by using the physicality of his own body to go outside, using his body as a sculptural tool and material to create work directly in relationship with and to the natural environment. And it's really in this broad context of Klee and Long, and there are others that followed. Hamish Fulton comes to mind, Andy Goldsworthy. This is really within the context that my current art practice exists. So we'll move to slide 3, please. So this is the only visual that I have in the exhibition. What you're seeing to the left and to the right of the poem in the middle are two hills, East and West Lomond, that sit together, that dominate the skyline along the southeast of Scotland's Fife coast. And now in 2016, I took a length of rope to each summit and walked it out to draw a line, a physical, playful expression of artistic intent, capturing a moment in time, place, and infinite space. It's at this time that I'd like to introduce my guest and dear friend, Scottish-based visual artist and poet, Keren Macpherson. Keren lives about 20 miles away from the Lomond Hills, knows them and their environs intimately. Keren was inspired by the Lomond images I sent her, and I'm really humbled that she was inclined to compose a poem called Implied. So thank you for your poem to complement my images, Keren. And here's Keren to talk briefly about the images. And if you could keep the images on screen as Keren's talking, I'd appreciate it. So if you could pop those images back up there. And then Keren will talk about her poem, recite her poem. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Keren, and I'm here in Fife, Scotland, where the weather is not unusually pretty miserable. Anyway, it's great to be here, and I'd just like to say thanks very much to Scott and to everyone else for having me here at this event. I feel very honoured to be among such talent. Just watching the video there looks great. The exhibition looks fantastic, and I'm sorry I can't see it in person. What struck me about Scott's photographs and the rope wasn't so much about what the rope says as an object, nor even what it says about the space it occupies, but more what the rope offers after it appears to stop. In the mind's eye, the line continues and it leads the viewer onwards. This suggestion of space has always fascinated me, both as an artist and as a poet. And it represents the unknown, the imagined. And it's a space gravid with possibility. I'll just read you my poem. Implied. At the margin of what is there, waits in midair the imaginable. The unseen line draws this place to the next, lengthens in the mind's time over a landscape of becoming. This is where the past starts, a memory not travelled. Entering a cloud, crows dissolve into possibility. Grass has a stab at what's above. Lives with threads of purpose grasp the invisible. Thank you. I'll hand you back to Scott.
Thank you. So we're just going to go to the last slide now. Thanks. So the Lomond images in 2016 inspired a journey of greater magnitude called 228 lines. And I'll just conclude my presentation today by showing a short film documenting 282 lines made by another dear friend of mine, Colin Macpherson. No relation to Keren other than the clan. So I'll just say that. Colin is a renowned Scottish photographer and filmmaker who accompanied me on 11 summits this past summer. So I do hope you enjoy the video. I thank you very much, and all the best, everyone. Stay healthy. Thanks.
Each summer, American-based Scottish artist Scott Anderson comes home. Even though he emigrated more than 20 years ago, the annual call of Scotland's mountains proves too strong for him to resist. And for the last 4 years, he's been on a mission to scale every one of the country's 282 Munros, those famed 3,000-foot hills, which define the Highland landscape and entice climbers, walkers and visitors alike into Scotland's rough and ready wildernesses. But Scott is no ordinary Munro bagger. His companion, as he attempts to climb every peak, is a simple length of rope. And with it, he is creating an artistic intervention which seeks to answer questions about the fundamental need for human beings to move, and how, by moving, we create lines in space and place to tell us where we were, where we are, and where we are going.
So I've taken the rope and I've walked the rope out in more or less a straight line and in a direction that I feel is aesthetically pleasing with respect to the photograph that I'm going to take of the rope in the landscape. So essentially the rope is a line. For me, in the photograph it ends up as a line that feels somewhat like it's been drawn on the landscape and on the ground. It leads the eye to the horizon, to the distant view, and gives a sense of scale and space. So that's really what I'm trying to accomplish.
In addition to the photographic record of the rope intersecting the landscape at the cairn, Scott takes memento from the summit in the shape of a stone. It is a minute token of place, millions of years old, its origin once part of a star which collided with Earth. Scott uses the information gathered to lay out the photograph of both stone and summit, and notes the location, date, altitude and time, setting these out as a poetic reference for reflection on place, landmark, journey, movement and time. After 4 years, he can now reflect on visiting just over 80 peaks, just a couple of hundred more to go. But this is not the whole story. Scott and I have been friends since boyhood. Back then, running about in sport were the bonds that kept us together. Even when Scott moved away, the connection has always been there, and when he comes back to Scotland, our goal is to meet up and set ourselves some challenge, often involving a mountain or two.
You want, unless you're desperate for having rice separate from your curry, but that's all the way I can do it.
This year, as lockdown was loosened, I accompanied Scott for the first time on 282 lines, as he climbed a further 5 hills towards his quest of eventually completing all the Munros. Our journey took us up to the Central Highlands, to mountains with romantic names, rendered even more atmospheric in the Gaelic language. There was the Little Yellow Place, or Avunak Vec, Red Hill, Carn Jerak, and the Old Woman, Akeliach, in the vernacular. Climbing with Scott allowed me time to meditate and think about my own relationship with Scotland's mountains, and how I could document not only what Scott was doing, but present a wider representation of the Munros as a backdrop to my own photography, and at the same time gain a deeper understanding of what I was seeing and experiencing. Peopleless places can often feel like empty voids. Out here, as we took on the physical challenges of the Scottish weather and the midges, we were facing a different kind of solitude to the one we have all recently experienced due to COVID-19. The mountains felt warm and welcoming, like constant companions. You get to know the hills intimately as you climb them. Each rugged contour, corrie and bealach alternate between obstacles and achievements. Eventually, a Munro becomes your friend for life. The mountaineer and writer Cameron McNeish sums it up beautifully when he says, "Up here, you become aware of the shapes around you, not so much the shape of the hills themselves, but the smooth flowing contours of the corries which bite their way into these high uplands. Here are forms which are sensuous, smooth, gradual and majestic." This description of what I experienced seems to chime with Scott's work, which pays attention to the world around us, but is still intimate and personal. As I waved him off on the next leg of his journey, I felt a pang of jealousy. But then I remembered we'd already planned our next rendezvous, where again we'll spend time walking the 282 lines together.
Adios.